Hello students, myself Jinalisha welcomes you on behalf of Saraswati International Academy. Students, in the last lecture we have discussed some points regarding the systematics, which includes identification, classification, nomenclature. Lastly, we have studied the binomial nomenclature, which means the organism's name consists of two words. The first word is a generic name and the second name is the specific epithet. Right students? Now students, today we will continue with that point only, but we will deal in detail regarding the classification. Now students, what do you mean by the term classification? When we use the term classification, it means that basically we are dealing to categorize something, right? To divide something into groups, to divide something into various categories. So how can we define the term classification? So students, it is grouping of the organisms into the categories based on the easily observable characters. So students, classification is a scientific method to group the organisms into various categories. And how the organisms are grouped into various categories? The grouping is done on the basis of easily observable characters. So classification is a method of grouping the organisms into various categories on the basis of easily observable characters. Say for example, I see an organism. That organism is moving, it is having four legs. So what will I say? That particular organism is an animal. Again I see an organism which is having roots, it is having flowers, it is having leaves. So what will I do? I will categorize that particular organism as a plant. So I have categorized the organism based on their easily observable characters, the characters which are easily seen through the naked eyes. So students, that method of grouping the organisms into various categories based on easily observable characters is called as classification. And students, the scientific name of that category is called as taxa. So taxa is the scientific name for the category. Now students, example for how to classify the organisms. So we easily recognize the groups such as plants, animals, dogs, cats, insects, etc. We can easily categorize that particular organism will be a plant, particular organism will be animal, that particular organism will be dog, etc. So how are we able to recognize these particular groups? We are able to recognize these particular groups because we associate certain characters with the organisms in that group. Why are we telling? Say for example, if you see an organism which is having a leaf, flower, root, etc. You tell that organism as a plant and not as an animal, right? You will always say that that particular organism will be a plant. Why are we able to say that it is a plant and not an animal? So students, the reason is we associate certain characters with the organisms present in that group. What are we doing? We associate certain characters with the organisms which are present in that group. Say for example, we continue with this thing. So students, if I ask you a question, what image do you see when you think of dog? My question is, when you think of dog, what image do you see in your mind? So students, of course, what image we will see? We will see always the image of the dog, not the image of the cat or any other animal. If I say you to imagine a dog, what image will be created in your mind? Of course, you see the image of the dog. None of you will see the image of cat or any other animal. Same way, if I say you to imagine a mammal, what characters do you associate with that? Say for example, you will associate that that particular organism will have the external ear and its body will be covered by the hair. So these are certain characters which you are associating with what? Mammals. Same way, if I tell you to imagine a wheat in your mind, of course, what will you imagine? Wheat. You will never see the image of rice or any other plants. So why are we able to do this? Because we are associating certain characters with these organisms. So now students, whatever terminologies I have used here, say for example, dogs, cats, mammals, rice, wheat, plants, animals, etc. What are they all? They all are the categories, and it is this category which we use to study the organisms. Whatever terminology, dog, cat, mammal, wheat, rice, plants, wheat, etc. What are all these? Students, all these are the categories, and it is these categories which we use to study the organisms. And students, the scientific name of this category is a taxa. What is the scientific name of a category? It is taxa. Now students, the taxa indicates the category at the different levels. Very important. Taxa, they indicate the categories at different level. Say for example, we know that plants, rice, wheat, mammals, dogs, etc. What are they? They all are taxa. But say for example, I tell that dog is what? Dog is a mammal. And what are mammals? Mammals are the animals. What are mammals? They are the animals. So students, what we can say, this dog, mammals and animals, they all represent a taxa. What are they all? They all are taxa. But what do they indicate? They indicate the different levels. So students, taxa indicate the categories at the different levels. So students, this is regarding the classification. What is classification? Grouping of the organisms into the categories which is based on the observable characters. And the scientific name of this category is called as taxa. And students, the taxa, they represent the categories at the different levels. We have studied this by taking an example of a dog. Dog is a mammal, and all mammals are what? Animals. So these dogs, this mammal and the animals, what are they? They are the categories, or you can say they are the taxa at the different levels. So students, this is regarding the classification. Now we will deal with the taxonomy and systematics together. Students, now we will deal with the taxonomy. So students, what is taxonomy? Taxonomy is a field of science which deals with identification, classification and nomenclature of the organisms. What is taxonomy? The field of science dealing with identification, classification and nomenclature of the organism. Now students, I told you that on the basis of the special characteristics present within the organism, all the living organisms are classified into different categories. How are the living organisms categorized? They are categorized on the basis of the special characteristics. So, on the basis of these characteristics, living organisms are divided or grouped into different categories. And students, the scientific term for this category is taxa. We have discussed it earlier. So, students, on the basis of the characteristics, what are living organisms done? They are divided into different categories. And this process of classification is called as what? Taxonomy. So what is taxonomy? Taxonomy means to divide or to categorize the organisms into different groups, into different categories on the basis of the spatial characteristics. What is it called as? It is called as the taxonomy. And this Thus, we can say that the process of classification, process of dividing the organisms into different categories on the basis of characters is called as taxonomy. Very important. Who is known as the father of taxonomy? So, he is the Carolus Linnaeus. Now, students, what is modern taxonomic studies based on? What things are included in the modern taxonomic studies? See students, earlier also taxonomical studies were used. But what forms the basis of the modern taxonomic studies? What things are included in modern taxonomic studies? So students, the modern taxonomic studies include internal and external structures, which is called as comparative morphology. So it includes the study of external structures as well as internal structures of an organism. It also includes the structure of the cells, which is called as the cytology, the developmental process of the organisms, how the developmental process, how, say for example, we human beings are formed from zygote. So from zygote, how a complete human being is formed, that is called as the developmental process. And that too, even before zygote, what processes takes place? All these things are considered under the developmental process. The field of that science is called as the embryology. And finally, it also includes ecological information of the organisms, which means ecology. Now students, what do you mean by the ecological information of organisms? Ecological information of organism means whether the organism is a producer, whether it is a consumer. If it is a consumer, it is an herbivore, carnivore, omnivore or what? It may be a saprophytic organism, it may be a parasitic organism, it may be a decomposer, etc. So, as well as where the organism lives, whether it is an terrestrial organism, whether it is an aquatic organism, these all things are considered as what? Ecological information of an organism. So students, what things are included in the modern taxonomic studies? Internal and external structures of an organism, structure of the cells. When I say structure of cell, what it includes? Whether the cell is a prokaryotic cell, whether it is a eukaryotic cell, whether cell wall is present or not. So all the detailed structures related to the cells will be included in cytology. Developmental process of an organism, and finally the ecological information of an organism. Now students, from this, it provides the information according to the similarities, dissimilarities and evolutionary relationships of an organism. All these structures, they provide us the information according to the similarities, dissimilarities and evolutionary relationships of an organism. How the one organism have evolved from the other organisms. And that field which deals with the evolution of an organism, it is called as the phylogeny. What is it called as? Phylogeny. So students, from this we can say that there are certain processes which are basic to taxonomy. What things? When you deal with taxonomy, what you will be dealing with? So what we will be dealing with? We will be dealing with the characterization, identification, classification and nomenclature. Which are the processes basic to taxonomy? Characterization, identification, classification and nomenclature. Now students, I told you earlier that the field of taxonomy, these are the basis, these all things what we studied were the basis of the modern taxonomic studies. But I told you that the field of taxonomy is not new to human beings. Human beings were always interested in knowing more and more about the organisms, particularly with reference to their own use. So basically, human beings were interested in knowing more and more things regarding the organisms. But their interest was more to the relation of the use of the organisms. What was their main purpose? What could be the use of that particular organisms? In earlier days, basically, human beings needed to find the sources of their basic needs. The basic needs were not easily available as they are available now. Earlier, human beings needed to find the sources for their basic needs. What are the basic needs? So, food, clothing and shelter. So, basically to find sources for food, clothing and shelter, human beings they found, basically they took the help of the organisms. So, basically we can say that earliest classification system, they were based on the uses of the various organisms. So, earlier when the classification of organisms was done, it was done on what basis? On the basis of uses of organisms. Say for example, some animals were classified as the sources of milk. They were providing them with milk. Some organisms were categorized as the sources of eggs. Some animals were categorized on the basis of what? On the basis of providence of the meat. So earlier classification systems were based on what? On the uses of the organisms. Now students, human beings were not only interested in knowing more and more about the organisms, but they were also interested in knowing the interrelationships between the organisms. What relations occurs between the two organisms. So not only they were interested in knowing the use of the organism or knowing more and more about organisms, but what relationships exist between the organisms, they were also keen to know that. And that branch of science which solved their problem was systematics. Now students, the systematics term is derived from the Latin word systema, which means the systematic arrangement of organisms. The term systematics is derived from the Latin word systema, meaning the systematic arrangement of organisms. Linus, he gave the title to his publication as Systema Naturae. Systema Naturae is the title of the publication given by Linus. Now students, what systematics include? I told you systematics and taxonomy, they are the words which are used interchangeably. So like taxonomy, it also includes identification, nomenclature, classification and evolutionary relationships between the organisms. Like taxonomy, it includes identification, nomenclature, classification and evolutionary relationships of the organisms. So students, this is systematics and taxonomy, which means identification, characterization, classification and nomenclature of the organisms. Clear students? Now students, we will be dealing with the various taxonomic categories. Now students, we all know that the process of classification is not a single step process. It is a multi-step process. We cannot classify an organism by a single step. It requires many steps. So students, it involves hierarchy of steps. Hierarchy means levels, different levels of steps. And here students, each step represents a rank or category. Classification is not a single step process, it is a multi-step process. So in this hierarchy of the steps, in these levels of step, what is each step called as? Each step is called as a rank or a category. Each step is called as a rank or a category. Now as category is a part of overall taxonomic arrangement. What is category a part of? It is a part of a complete taxonomic arrangement. What is that category called as? It is called as the taxonomic category. What is it called as? It is called as a taxonomic categories. And student, all these categories together is called as taxonomic hierarchy. What is it called as? It is called as a taxonomic hierarchy. all the steps together. What is each step called as? Category, taxonomic category. All the taxonomic categories together is called as what? Taxonomic hierarchy. What is it called as? Taxonomic hierarchy. Now students, each unit of classification, it represents a rank, and what is that rank referred to as? Taxon. So each step is called as what? Taxon. Now students, this taxonomic hierarchy was first introduced by Linus, and therefore it is also called as the Linnean hierarchy. The taxonomic hierarchy was first introduced by, or it was first used by Linus, and therefore it is also called as the Linnean hierarchy. Now students, how can, if we want to study properly taxonomic categories and hierarchy, it can be easily studied by taking an example. So students, say for example, I consider the insects. Now what insects include? So basically it includes a group of the organisms which share a common feature like 3 pairs of the jointed legs. So students, these insects, they are what? Recognizable concrete objects which can be easily classified. How can we classify particular organism as an insect? Suppose an organism have the 3 pairs of jointed leg. So by observing this, we can recognize that a particular object is what? It is an insect. So this insect, it is given what? It is given a rank or a category, which is, whose scientific term is a taxon. Now students, the groups, they represent a category, and this category further denotes what? It denotes a rank. The group, it represents the category, and category further refers to the rank, and it is the rank which is called as the unit of classification. Category or rank, what is it called as? It is called as a unit of classification, and scientifically it is called as a taxon. Now students, whatever taxonomic categories are there, they are a complete biological entity and not only the morphological aggregates. Whatever category is there, whatever taxon is there, it is a biological entity, and not only, it does not indicate that it is a group of the morphological aggregate. No, it includes what? It includes a distinct biological entity. Say for example, mammals. So mammals is not only human beings, but all the organisms with the mammary glands and other features. So basically it is not only a group of morphological aggregate, but it is a complete biological entity. Now students, these are the various taxonomic categories. These are, on this side, they are the categories for plants, and on this side there are the categories for animals. So students, the first category is a kingdom. Then in the plants, the first category is kingdom, then there is division, then there is class, then there is order, then there is family, then there is genus, and then finally species. Similarly, there are categories for animals which include kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus and species. Now students, here you can see the only difference lies in the second category. The second category for plants is division. This division in the animals is called as the phylum. So these are the 7 main taxonomic categories for plants and animals. Now students, our question arises that how to classify the organism, how to group an organism into these particular categories. So basically we should have the knowledge of the characters of the particular category. We should have the knowledge of the characters of the particular category, and then we can differentiate the organisms, we can group the organisms on the basis of the similarities and dissimilarities. Now students, as we move from kingdom to species, we will see later on that the similarities in the characters, they increases. Very important. As we move from kingdom to species, the similarities in the characters will increase, and the vice versa. As we move from species to kingdom, then the similarities in the character, they decreases. Very important. As we move from kingdom to species, what will happen? The number of similar characters within each and every category, they go on increasing. Vice versa to that is, as we move from species to kingdom, the similarities within the group keeps on decreasing. So these are the various taxonomic categories. Now students, we will study each and every taxonomic category in the detail. Now students, my question, how to place an organism into various taxonomic categories. We know that 7 main various taxonomic categories are there. Kingdom, the next is division or phylum. It is division for plants, phylum for animals. Then there is order, class, family, genus and species. So these are the 7 main taxonomic categories. Now question arises, how to place an organism into the various taxonomic categories. So students, to place an organism into various taxonomic categories, there is a need of a knowledge of characters of an individual or group of organism. The basic requirement is the knowledge of characters of an individual or group of organisms. So we need to have the basic knowledge of the characters. Say for example, mammal. So first of all, we should have the basic knowledge of the characters which would be included in the mammals. So to have the knowledge of the characters of an individual or the group of organisms, that is the most and foremost important thing to place an organism into the various categories. So now on the basis of that characters, it helps in identifying the similarities and dissimilarities among the individuals of same kind of organisms as well as the other kind of organisms. So by studying the characters of an organisms, we come to know the similarities and dissimilarities in the organisms of the same kind as well as within the organisms of the different kind. Those organisms which shows the similarities, they will be placed in one group, and those which shows the dissimilarities will be placed in the other group. So by having the knowledge of the characters of an organism or a group of organism, we can identify the similarities and dissimilarities among the individuals of the same kind as well as of the other kind of the organisms. And those organisms which have the maximum similarities will be placed in one group and others will be placed in the other groups. Now students, the 7 main taxonomic categories, we will study them. The first taxonomic category is the species. So which organisms are included in species? Those organisms which includes the similarities in the maximum number of characters. The group of the organisms which shows the fundamental similarities in maximum number of characters. What are they included in? They are included in species. So species is a group of the organisms which shows the similarities in maximum number of characters. Taxonomic studies consider group of individuals organisms with fundamental similarities as species. So those organisms which have the fundamental similarities, say for example human beings, I too have 2 eyes, legs, so you all are also human beings. So we have the fundamental similarities in all the characters. So this group of organisms which includes the organism with the fundamental similarities, what is it considered as species? Now students, the members of the individuals within the same species, they can interbreed amongst themselves. Breeding is possible within the members of the same species, and they are reproductively isolated from the other species. We human beings can interbreed amongst ourselves, but can we breed with the organisms of the other species? No. We are isolated reproductively from the other species. Now students, one should be able to distinguish one species from other closely related species based on the distinct morphological differences. On the basis of the morphological differences, two species which are closely related with each other, they should be distinguished. We should be able to distinguish one species from the other closely related species on what basis? On the basis of the morphological differences. Now we will study some examples. Mangifera indica, the common name is mango. Solanum tuberosum, the common name is potato. Panthera leo, the common name is lion. Now students, here first of all, being scientific name, listen very carefully. I have underlined both the words separately. The name of the genus is beginning with the capital letter. The name of the species is beginning with the small letter. Remember the rules, universal rules of the binomial nomenclature. So students, in these three examples, the terms indica, tuberosum and leo, they indicate the species. And the first terms, Mangifera, Solanum and Panthera, they represent a higher category than species, and that category is genus. Now students, a genus may have one or more than one species which represents the different organisms but will have the morphological similarities. A genus can have one or more than one species, but this species represents the different organisms, but they will show certain morphological similarities. Again we will take the example, the Panthera and Solanum. What are they both? They both are the genus. What are they both? They both are the genus. Now I told you Panthera leo is a lion, but this Panthera genus, it also includes another organism, that is tigress. So this is lion, this is tiger. So this lion and tiger both are different organisms, right? But they will have the morphological similarities. So this particular genus, it consists of more than one species. So these two species are different from each other, but these two will share the morphological similarities. Same way, Solanum, it is a genus. Now this genus includes three species, Tuberosum, Nigrum and Melongena. So now these three species, these three organisms, they are different organisms, but yes, they too share the morphological similarities. So within a genus, more than one species may be present which represents the different organisms, but they share certain morphological similarities. Another important thing, human beings, their genus is Homo and their species is Sapiens. So scientific name of human beings is Homo sapiens, in which the Homo represents the genus and Sapiens represents the species. So students, that is regarding the first taxonomic category, that is species, which is the lowest taxonomic category. Now we will begin with the next taxonomic category, that is genus. Now students, the next taxonomic category is genus. It is a category higher than the species. Species is the lowest taxonomic categories with the organisms which show the fundamental similarities. Now the next taxonomic category which is higher than species is genus. So basically what is a genus? It is a group of related species which have more characters in common in comparison to the species of other genera. So in simple words we can say that it is an aggregate of closely related species. Those species which show maximum similarities in characters, they will be placed into a group. So now students, the group of the related species, they have more characters in common in comparison to the species of the other genera. Suppose there are two genus. So now within that two genus, whatever organisms are included, in that particular genus, the organisms will show the more similarities. But when we compare the organisms of two different genuses, then the similarities will be not more. So students, we take an example. First of all, my question, whether this thing which is written, it is correct or not? No students, because see what is the mistake? Being scientific name, what it should be done? The name of the genus and species, they should be underlined separately. Here also they should be underlined separately. Similarly, here also see these are the common names. So if I don't underline, it is okay. Now students, scientific name, why are they underlined when they are handwritten? Recall your knowledge, because to show their Latin origin. Now students, see this genus. Which is the name of the genus? Here the genus is Solanum, right? Now this Solanum genus, it includes three species, Tuberosum, Melanogyna and Nigrum. Now these three species, they have certain characters in common and therefore where are they placed? They are placed into the common genus, that is Solanum. Same way the genus Panthera. This Panthera is what? It is genus. Now this Panthera genus, it includes three different species. Which are those three species? Leo, which is lion, Panthera tigris, which is tiger, and Panthera pardus, that is leopard. Now students, these three organisms, these three species will show certain common characteristics, and as they show certain common characteristics, where are they placed? They are placed in the genus Panthera. Now students, there is another genus and that is Felis, which is a family or which is a genus of cats. It includes common cats, jungle cats and golden cats. Now students, the organisms of the Panthera genus and the organisms of the Felis genus, they won't show the characteristics in common because they both are the different genuses. So students, what is a genus? Genus is a group of species which show the similarities in the characters. Those species which shows maximum similarities in the character will be kept in the one genus. So students, today I end our lecture here. The next taxonomic categories which are remaining, we will be studying it in the next lecture. Along with that, we also will be studying regarding the taxonomical aids. What we have studied today? Today we have studied regarding classification, taxonomy, then we have studied systematics. We have also studied regarding the taxonomic categories, and we have studied 2 taxonomic categories in detail. Today I end my lecture here. Thank you.